Welcome back to StoryTime. In today's episode, we'll be continuing our reading of Machines and Men. But before I jump into it, I just want to give a quick reminder that if you want to become a Creant and be part of our community, you should consider joining our Reddit at r/CreantWorld. That's where we're going to have the major interactions for this channel and where you can suggest Storytime ideas. It's also where we're going to be having any news or postings regarding contests, and we are going to be having a contest coming up pretty soon. I'll keep you posted on that as we get a little closer to that time. Machines and Men is a story that is not necessarily appropriate for children. It does contain adult language and some sexual situations. Viewer discretion is advised. And now, Machines and Men, Chapter 7, Mannequin and Mall. It was not as easy as it seemed to buy clothes for a robot, though. When Stephen brought Vera to the mall the next day, it made it clear to him just how much he would have to teach her. The first stop along their route was Sears. Stephen brought Vera to the underwear department, but quickly realized that despite having assigned her body proportions, he didn't know anything at all about how to properly fit a bra. "Hey, Vera, look around for a sales rep. I think we're going to need some help," Stephen said, looking around and turning on the spot. "Okay," Vera said cheerfully. "How can I tell them apart from everyone else?" Look for a woman with a name tag on her shirt," Stephen said. Was that right? He had shopped at Sears before, but he never noticed whether they wore name tags or not. He assumed they must, because how else were you supposed to tell them apart from the customers? Glancing over, he saw Vera disappearing around a corner, scanning left and right. Stephen bit his lip, uncertain as to whether or not to let her go alone, but it was too late now. It was probably best that he wait here so that Vera could find her way back, but he immediately began to feel self-conscious. It was that sort of uncomfortable feeling that only a straight man can feel while standing alone in a lingerie aisle. It was also strange how only a minute earlier there had been no one around, but now women seemed to be flocking to the area. It might be 2035, but a man in the lingerie aisle still elicited scornful looks. Flushing, Stephen scuttled across to bedding department and sat down on a mattress. It always struck Stephen as passing odd that the bedding department was always near the lingerie aisle. It was an unsubtle way of reinforcing the age-old truth that sex sells. He hadn't been waiting long, though, when he caught sight of Vera returning with a woman in tow. "Hi," Stephen said, approaching the bemused sales rep who was being pulled by her hand by Vera. My girlfriend needs some help with sizing for underwear." "She's really strong," the sales rep said uncertainly. Stephen grimaced slightly. It hadn't seemed like a good idea somehow to mention that Vera was a robot. There was such a social divide on humanoid robots that he wasn't sure he should make a point of mentioning it. He wasn't ashamed of having a robot girlfriend per se, but he wasn't prepared to tell everyone about Vera just yet. If the sales rep couldn't tell the difference, he wasn't about to tell her. "So this would be a refitting?" the sales rep asked, getting out a measuring tape. "Well, actually," Stephen said, squirming from side to side, "she's never worn a bra before." The sales rep did a double take, looking first at Vera's expansive chest, then Stephen to see if he was joking. Stephen couldn't blame her for being disbelieving. A real woman with the breasts the size of Vera's would have needed some serious support from an early age. Of course, a steel skeleton and mechanical muscles meant that Vera would never get tired or develop back pain from her generous proportions. The sales rep seemed hesitant for a moment and then asked Vera to take off her windbreaker. Fortunately, Stephen had anticipated this request and had given Vera one of his t-shirts so she wouldn't be naked when she took the coat off. It had been very attractive to see her large breasts squeezed into his shirt, but Stephen couldn't help and reflect how wonderful it was going to be to see Vera in clothes that suited her gorgeous body. The sales rep got Vera's measurements, pulling the shirt taut behind her back, and then led them to a rack where there were bras in her size. "If you can demonstrate how to put this on," Vera said, holding out a bra to the sales rep, "I'll watch you and then I'll be fine on my own." "Well, it's very easy. You just attach these little hooks into the little loops, like this. Then you release by pulling back on this little tab, like that." She demonstrated on the mannequin, showing Vera how to put on the bra and take it off. She also explained how to adjust the straps and how to work the front-facing bras and sports bras. Vera listened politely and watched with interest as the sales rep walked her through the process. When all was said and done, she thanked the sales rep warmly, and then she turned to Stephen, waiting for further instructions. There was a pause where no one spoke, and then Stephen realized Vera couldn't pick out her favorites because she didn't have any. She was waiting for him to pick out her lingerie for her. There was something very intimate about that, and it made him blush. So, for the first time in his life, Stephen Waters went bra shopping. He picked out the styles and colors, and Vera would find them in her size. It was sort of nice to be out shopping with a girl. In the past, Stephen's girlfriends had taken him shopping, but he had never been anything more than a glorified porter on those occasions. They would ask him if this top made her boobs look big or if that dress made her ass look fat, and then would proceed to completely discount his advice and buy it anyway. Stephen wondered, not for the first time, why women asked men their opinion and then never followed their advice. After all, who should know better what men liked than a man? And yet, time and again, his exes had discounted his suggestions and gone their own route. This was something of a golden opportunity, and Stephen intended to make the most of it. Somewhat vindictively, Stephen had made a point of picking out the exact same color and style of bra Becky had been wearing in her profile picture with Jeffrey the Wonder Boy. He had no doubt that Vera would fill it better, since she easily had Becky beat by 2 cup sizes. He briefly considered recreating the hated profile picture with Vera, and was stopped not by any feeling of shame, but rather by the knowledge that Becky was no longer his Facebook friend, and therefore would never see it. He was still very sore about the breakup, and as a Libra, he was eager to find balance and revenge. During the interminable wait while he had waited for Vera to arrive, Stephen had imagined 1,000 different scenarios where he and Becky would cross paths, each more unlikely than the last. He would be aloof and distant, greet Becky with only the faintest courtesy, and then leave with the vastly more attractive Vera on his arm. Maybe he would toss out casually that Vera, a robot, treated him far better and loved him far more than she ever had. Oh, how she would beg for another chance, and he would emotionlessly tell her that he had given her her chance and she had blown it. It was a delicious thought, if a very unlikely one. After Vera had tried on various pairs of underwear, they moved on to outfits. This was when Stephen moved into his element. He'd always had a good color sense, and thoroughly enjoyed picking out outfits and color coordinating them. Shopping with Vera was giving a great opportunity to flex his feminine side, and he was surprised at how much he was enjoying it. The two spent the whole day at the mall, shopping and talking, and in general being like any normal couple. He brought her to the makeup counter, where she received a thorough education in the art of makeup from an overly talkative, cheerful blonde. They watched a movie at the multiplex, and played video games in its arcade. They went to Barnes & Noble, and Stephen talked enthusiastically about books. In short, they spent a very enjoyable date together, and had, in Stephen's opinion, the best first date ever. When they finally headed back to the house, Stephen deposited the various shopping bags in his room, and busied himself clearing a space in his closet and drawers for Vera's new clothes. He had never shared a dresser before, and it felt very intimate. Vera plopped down on the bed and watched Stephen with a smile. When he finally turned, Stephen caught her watching and hopped onto the bed next to her. He pulled her on top of him and kissed her. She didn't react at first, but seeing that Stephen had his eyes closed, she closed her eyes as well. Stephen sighed and stroked Vera's cheek softly. "I'm going to get myself something to eat, Vera. Why don't you change into one of your new outfits? I'd love to see you do a little fashion show for me," he said, poking Vera playfully in the side. "Which one do you want to see first?" Vera asked, smirking playfully. "Surprise me," Stephen said, kissing Vera on her forehead. "They're all good options, babe." Stephen started making himself dinner when he heard Vera coming down the stairs. He turned to see her and was flattened by the image of loveliness that met his eyes. Vera was wearing a turquoise sweater, which exposed the straps of her bra, which was a lavender one. She was also wearing a flirty chiffon skirt that ranged in color between white and azure blue. Her feet were in leather sandals, and she had a blue hairband in her umber locks. She'd always been breathtaking, but the addition of feminine clothes was the final note in the symphony of beauty that was Vera. "What do you think?" Vera asked, turning to show off her wonderful back. Stephen didn't say a word, but he crossed the kitchen and folded Vera in an embrace. He stayed like that for a long time, just wanting to hold her. He smelled the clean smell of shampoo, felt her warm face against his, felt her warm embrace as she hugged him back, the soft press of her breast against him. She was so perfect, so beautiful. He looked into those luminous eyes and kissed her. The kiss started off close-lipped and sweet and became more lingering. He felt her mouth open under his, entwined his tongue with hers. Taking her face in his hands, he sighed and moaned into her mouth. It was then that Stephen realized he loved Vera. He loved her so deeply it hurt. Loved her beyond all words to express. But it was a realization that also brought sadness, because she wasn't real. Stephen squeezed Vera, trying to convince him that she was a real woman, but he couldn't lie to himself as he had lied to everyone else. She was a machine, an image of beauty and compassion beyond compare, but a fantasy nonetheless. He wished she was a real woman, wished it more than anything in the world, but she wasn't. He had made her, and no matter how much he wished otherwise, there was no changing the fact that she was a robot, and always would be. Stephen opened his eyes and looked into the eyes of his robot. Fuck it. Stephen didn't care if she was a robot or a dream or a fantasy. If it was to be a fantasy, then at least it was a good one. Once again, Stephen told the rational voice at the back of his head to shut up. So she was a fantasy. What was wrong with that? He didn't care if she was a fantasy. The way he was feeling, he was in the mood for some fantasy. Let's go upstairs. Stephen breathed into Vera's ear. What about your dinner? Vera asked softly. Later, Stephen said as he drew her upstairs. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, please hit that like button. And if you really enjoyed it, consider subscribing. And if you'd like to continue to be a Creant, you can also join us on our Reddit, as well as on Twitter and our other social media sites.